I live and work next to the Tulalip tribe in Washington state, so it is important to me to honor them with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge the inhabitants of this area, the Snohomish people and their successors, the Tulalip tribe. Since time immemorial, they have hunted, fished, gathered, and taken care of these lands. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and honor their sacred spiritual connection with the land and water. We will strive to be honest about our past mistakes and bring about a future that includes their people, stories, and voices to form a more just and equitable society. Thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your day to be here with me. I am Nicole Donovan. I consider myself an authentic and vulnerable leader, so I will begin this introduction by highlighting the places I hold power and privilege and where I am marginalized. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am a white, cisgender, heterosexual, American, middle-aged, middle-class, spiritual, non-religious, non-visibly disabled, English-speaking, single mother of adult children, highly educated woman. Welcome to Do the Work, Policies and Practices for Working Birthing People. When Ruth Bader Ginsburg argued her first sexual discrimination case in front of the United States Supreme Court in 1973, in the case of Frontiero versus Richardson, she cited the 19th century abolitionist and women's rights activist, Sarah Grimke, during her oral argument, saying, "I ask no favor for my sex. All I ask of our brethren is that they take their feet off our necks." Inequities in the workplace have become increasingly complex over the years. Each person contains layers of intersectionality in who they are that affect how they are treated at work. There are long-standing and well-documented workplace inequities along the lines of race, class, gender, sexual orientation, and religion. Women face more challenges than men, a Black woman even more so. Someone who is non-binary or transgender faces even more challenges than women. The hierarchy of inequities across the various aspects of one's personhood will ultimately affect how one is paid, evaluated, and rewarded. In my presentation today, I will cover my introduction and the background, the specific aims of this project, the literature review, the methods and implementation, the product, which is my toolkit for leadership, and a discussion. So my why. Organizational cultures and leadership have a significant impact on one's experience at work. I spent 5 years in school, as Wendy said, to become a licensed midwife back in the mid-2000s. I was so extremely passionate about midwifery work, yet ended up with a supervisor that slowly killed that passion over the 4 years I worked for her. She was minimizing and verbally abusive. As challenging as that experience was, it created a foundation in advocacy work for employees and birthing people, and a passion for creating positive and inclusive work cultures with leadership that embrace intersectionality and belonging in their employees and teams. I felt it was important to include Webster's definitions of marginalization and oppression. So the Webster definition of marginalization is to relegate to an unimportant or powerless position within a society or group. And oppression is an unjust or cruel exercise of authority or power. Historically, marginalized gender identities include transgender women, cisgender women, transgender men, non-binary individuals, and all gender identities which have been systemically oppressed by those in power throughout history. In order to create an inclusive, anti-oppressive work environment, and to address family-friendly policies and practice, we must not only support working mothers, but include gender non-conforming, non-binary, and transgender birthing people, and how intersectionality plays a role in their experience. The more we embrace our humanity and don't have to park parts of who we are at the doors of work, the more we can create cultures of belonging and create leaders who don't kill anyone's passion for their work. Slowly, my computer is giving me my next slide. Canva is frozen, so one moment. Perfect timing. All right, let's see if I'm going to stop sharing for one moment. Sorry, everyone, and see if it will unfreeze for me.
No worries, Nicole.
You have time.
No matter how many times you practice and think it's all good. Yeah, Canva is literally frozen for me. Okay. Okay, it appears that you all are just going to get to look at my lovely face, and I'm just going to keep going without slides. How about that?
That sounds wonderful, Nicole. Go right ahead.
You know, part of leadership is knowing how to adapt. Adaptive leadership is such a skill that's important to have. So here we go. So the specific aims of my my project were conducting a context review and to locate and analyze and synthesize the material that was available. The information that I particularly looked at was information on mental health impacts of working birthing people, information on the challenges that working birthing people face in organizations, to determine organizational policies that best support working birthing people in organizations, to determine organizational policies that best support working birthing people to prevent turnover, looking at what the benefits of birthing people to organizations is, how does birthing change individuals as employees, and can this benefit the organization if they are supported? Information on how to best support working birthing people in by organizations, leadership, human resources, and management, including the benefits of team building and organizational cultures. Also to determine economic benefits of organizations for supporting working birthing people, and to explore the intersectionality of other marginalized identities birthing people experience in the workplace. The second aim was to determine which things were considered best practices and policies to support birthing people in organizations, and to consolidate that literature regarding best practices and policies, to compile economic and cultural benefits to organizations for supporting working birthing people. The third was to evaluate a survey instrument to assess the availability and use of family-friendly policies in organizations to support working birthing people and work-life balance by incorporating intersectionality of other marginalized identities. The fourth was to create a toolkit and write an executive brief for organizational leaders reviewing different leadership styles, and to recommend best styles for supporting of whole person intersectionality in working birthing people. So for the literature review, the search methods I used for collecting the literature were reviews in an electronic sources of PsycInfo, CINAHL, and Business Source Complete in November 2021. These databases were chosen for availability of relevant studies related to working birthing people. Birthing people is not a search term available at this time. So though the research all referred to working mothers, I made the choice to use inclusive language, substituting mother with working birthing people. In the CINAHL and the CINAHL and PsycInfo, there were 37 articles that I narrowed it down to that included information for context review and best practices. And the literature for the business sector came from Business Source Complete and resulted in 18 articles that looked at working mothers, leadership, and intersectionality from 2010 forward for current organizational reference. So the main topics that were found in the literature were challenges working birthing people face, impacts towards working birthing people, impacts on health, and organizational support. So challenges working birthing people face include the conflict between balancing work and family has increased over the years. The increase in working birthing people being the primary source of income increases the urgent need family-friendly policies and wage rates that reflect their male counterparts are needed. All working birthing people must be considered individually when applying accommodations in the workplace. Each person's experience is different. Caring for a child with a disability, an aging parent, being a single parent, etc., all adds to one's complexity in life. The support for chest feeding goes beyond just providing a private room, like a stall in the bathroom. 60% of lactating individuals who return to work reported weaning earlier than desired. A supportive break room for pumping that ideally would be comfortable, warm to facilitate the letdown reflex of human milk when pumping, with a private refrigerator to store the human milk. In addition, adequate break times without fear of penalty are needed at work to support a successful health promoting chest feeding journey. Chest feeding provides health benefits in the long run, such as reducing the risk of certain types of cancer, type 2 diabetes, and hypertension in the birthing person. And the longer the chest feeding period, the greater the health benefits. The health benefits to the child include less incidence of asthma, diabetes, obesity, childhood leukemia, and sudden infant death syndrome. The impacts towards working birthing people in that topic, the highlights were that work-family conflict is used to describe the overwhelm that leaves working birthing people feeling shattered by trying to do it all, leading to lower satisfaction in work, life, and relationships. Several studies have addressed the negative impact of work-family conflict on employees' health and psychological distress. The variety of psychological areas of well-being that are affected by work-family conflict includes personal, job, and overall life satisfaction. When you add in traditional societal gender roles, it increases the work-family conflict for birthing people, particularly in partnered relationships. Though not all aspects of work-family conflict are negative, and research sheds light on the positive aspects of having two unique roles, work and family, that may increase working birthing people's psychological well-being. The impacts on health that were highlighted were that single working birthing people experienced an increase in generalized stress, work stress, financial stress, mental health conditions, and work-family conflict. Many birthing people bear a second shift role defined as the responsibility for housekeeping tasks and care of children that begins after they get home from work. This second shift decreases time to rest and recover from the workday, over time causing exhaustion and increasing stress. Though birthing people who return to work sooner after birth may experience guilt from being away from the family, one study found that they may also have increased appreciation for quality of time and are more present during their time with their children as compared to the non-working parents. The ability to control one's work environment and schedule was really the single most crucial factor for working birthing people to rate their overall health positively. And this control also led to a decreased risk of developing heart disease. Though other studies have supported the impact of control at work to be of benefit to a working birthing person's mental health and well-being. In organizational support in the workplace, individuals who identify as women or non-binary face gender inequity. Yet when they become pregnant or become new parents, an additional layer of oppression is created that has to be navigated by them and addressed by the organization. Organizations and leadership have an immense amount of power to influence these employees' lives. The literature states that the influence can be positive or negative depending upon the level of training, accommodations, and support offered during this transitional time in the employee's life. When organizations bring awareness and training to oppressive and marginalizing behaviors, both explicit and implicit, organizations experience increased employee satisfaction, loyalty, and performance. Organizational policies, cultural values, and work environment have on the employee's personal and workplace well-being are achieved when their work situations, when they're given their preferred work situations. It was found that flex time is beneficial to divorced or widowed working birthing people, while working from home or working reducing hours or working only during the school year was most helpful to those that were in partnered relationships. Some of the benefits, including increased well-being, job commitment, job performance, and decreased states of depression was found in working birthing people. Organizations found that allowing time, flexibility, and gradual return to working full-time lower actually the cost of turnover by retaining birthing people. It's beneficial to organizations to retain employees due to the high cost of turnover. It costs an approximate of 1 year's salary to replace an employee, with the hidden costs that include the loss of production and the historical organizational knowledge. The need for federal policies to support paid parental leave, which is not available in all states. We're lucky enough here in Washington state to have it, but it is not a federal policy yet. Will help support paid parental leave, public childcare, and flexible working agreements. When federal policies are in place, as it is in some other countries, it really forces organizations to play a key role. Countries with these federal policies in place, working birthing people return to work sooner, stating that the managers see the support of flexible work agreements as the social responsibility of the organization, not just something that they consider it nice to have. So the project, it led me to a search was conducted, pardon me, for a survey instrument to assess the current state of family-friendly practices in organizations and the effect on job satisfaction and mental well-being on working birthing people. The search method used for collecting a survey instrument was an electronic search of Business Source Complete in April 2022. There were 4 articles from the search for evaluation. 3 of them were not applicable really to the work. So the selection was the Workplace Employment Relations Study from 2011, which is also referred to as the WEIRS 2011 survey. And it focused on workplace employment relations with 3 categories of data collection: work in the shadow of a recession, employment relationships, and work life. The United Kingdom's government collected data over 3 decades with the WEIRS survey and included specific questions that address the family-friendly policies needed to support working birthing people in organizations. 3 sections were drawn from the survey of employees, and they addressed the family-friendly policies, mental well-being, and job satisfaction. In organizations, there can be a great disconnect between the knowledge of policies between leadership and employees. So to uncover any lack of transparency or understanding of available family-friendly policies and their use, I altered some of the questions to be included into 2 individual surveys. The survey questions from WEIRS 2011 were incorporated into a toolkit for use by business leaders to assess the availability of family-friendly practices in their organization and the extent to which those policies are used by their employees and the impact of employees' mental health and job satisfaction. The survey can also be used to determine gaps in those policies and practices which need to be available to meet the needs of working birthing people. An executive brief was also created to make recommendations on how the assessment should be used, as well as leadership styles that support family-friendly policies and working birthing people. In my paper, I share if and how each survey question was, if at all, adapted from WEIRS 2011. The first survey addresses the question of whether or which family-friendly policies are already in place in the organization and should be the first step for leaders to assess not only what the organization offers, but also whether employees are aware of these policies. The survey should be administered to organizational leadership and working birthing people at all levels of the organization. The policies included are flex time, job sharing, a chance to reduce working hours, working the same hours across a few days, working from home, working only during the school term, and paid leave to care for dependents in an emergency. The second survey is the use of family-friendly policies, and it is to assess which policies are being used or have been used in the past by working birthing people in the organization. It's important for leaders to be able to differentiate between the availability of family-friendly policies and what is actually being used. This may inform leadership of areas where further learning is needed to understand why certain policies may be underutilized or why disparities may exist in who is accessing the various benefits offered. If social inequities are preventing some people in the organization from using the benefits offered, it is important for the leadership to understand why and to revise their policies so that all employees can access their benefits. The next survey is Working Birthing People's Mental Health and Well-Being Instrument. It is intended to assess the employee's level of well-being. Included questions are about the frequency of feeling tense, depressed, worried, gloomy, uneasy, and miserable. And the final survey, Working Birthing People Job Satisfaction Instrument, is intended to assess the level of job satisfaction. The importance of this survey is to evaluate the satisfaction of working birthing people in relationship to availability of family-friendly policies. The questions include a sense of achievement you get from your work, the scope for using your own initiative, the amount of influence you have over your job duties, the training received, the opportunity to develop skills in your job, the amount of pay that you receive, job security in the work itself. There's also included a timeline for distributing the survey, which includes an initial assessment, one done at 3 months, 6 months, and then ongoing every 3 months for reflective practices. And in that timeline is also, it's laid out who should receive each of those surveys. There's a demographic section that I included to add in the layers of intersectionality and to bring awareness to how those might affect the use of someone accessing and using the policies. It was also important to include the option to not answer questions so that no one inadvertently becomes targeted by answering a question, being forced to answer a question that might identify them if they don't want to be identified. The executive brief consolidates this report for organizational leaders to assess current policies and practices. It includes recommendations for leadership styles to implement the policies and practices for inclusive organizational cultures and recommendations for anti-oppression training. Anti-oppression training is a critical piece of this work for organizational leadership because it addresses the core behaviors that create marginalizing behaviors. So what does it all mean? The evolution of anti-oppression work is expanded into embracing individuals' full humanity and all of their identities to create cultures of belonging. We can no longer look at someone's identity like this presentation that's not on the screen anymore, that was in black and white, or my outfit, which is also in black and white. Diversity, equity, and inclusion and justice training in recent years have become embedded in many organizations, yet the impact of this work are still emerging and are barely present in the current literature. This work is ongoing and requires leaders to be lifelong learners to dismantle the systems of power and play that continue to perpetuate systems of oppression in organizations. Anti-oppression workshops for leadership begin with common understanding of language and anti-oppression terms and concepts. With this foundation, training expands beyond language to intersectional, individual, and worldviews to create organizational cultural environments with an anti-oppressive lens that build a supportive and inclusive workplace. These concepts and trainings must be in-depth and ongoing by those in leadership roles. To improve working birthing people's mental well-being and job satisfaction, organizations should implement each of the family-friendly policies that are current best practices in the literature, including flex time, job sharing, ability to reduce hours, working the same hours across fewer days, working only during the school term, and paid leave to care for dependents in an emergency. Anti-oppression training across all organizational stakeholders is needed for policies and practices to truly change and to create a culture, to truly create change in the culture of an organization. Yet for real change to happen for all birthing people, we must all lock arms to hold each other up, to stay accountable, and to keep going. The journey will be bumpy at times and exhausting, but at the end, rewarding. Once working birthing people are no longer marginalized and oppressed in organizational cultures, then and only then can the work for all working birthing parents begin. So stop saying we'll do better, do the work, and don't ever stop doing better. The recommendations for further research is to explore the implications of intersectionality of individuals and organizations. It includes the effect of family-friendly practices on non-female identifying people. In addition, research is needed to address the impact of family-friendly policies on organizational cultures to continue anti-oppression practices and policies. The relationship between work-life balance and family-friendly policies deserves to be explored to uncover how people experience positive well-being at home and work. So my next steps, the next step is dissemination and implementation of the executive brief and the survey in organizations to share and evaluate the impact of family-friendly policies. I will continue to explore social justice leadership and the connection to transformative justice within organizations to further learning about anti-oppression work to transform organizational cultures. In addition, I'm awaiting acceptance to a doctoral program in organizational leadership that begins this fall. So I would like to make a big, huge thank you to all of the Bastyr faculty that had such a huge influence and impact on how I shaped this program. It's a program now, by the way, y'all. I don't know that you knew that. This project. To my amazing committee chair who gave so many hours of her time and effort, to Dr. Wendy Gordon. Thank you so much for turning this into just an amazing piece of work. To my other committee member, Dr. Laura Flores Caillou, who just gave an immense amount of feedback as well. To Sharon Weiser, who was a previous supervisor of mine that really was the first person that showed me what good, true, inclusive leadership looked like, and gave me such an opportunity to explore my own ability to lead a team. To my family, my parents that are here, my children that are here, to my friends, to my cohort, to all of my coworkers, all that have been here on this journey with me. Thank you for putting up with me and all of my stress and for supporting me and keeping me going on this journey. So thank you so much. Thank you for your patience as Canva decided not to work for me, but thank you.
Great work, Nicole.
Any questions?
So for questions, feel free to put them in the chat box or just raise your Zoom hand to ask a question. You can raise your hand by clicking on reactions and then raise hand. And while we're waiting for that, Nicole, I would love to ask you, like, what are your plans for how you're going to move this forward? Like, you've developed this great tool and an executive brief, and where's it going next?
Great question. Perhaps in the organization I work for right now, it will just be finding the places that are willing to start using it, and considering potentially some consultant work around implementing this within organizations for those that are interested as well. So start one place and go from there.
Nice. Great. Christina, I see you with your hand up.
I shall first lower my hand. Thank you so much, Nicole, for your wonderful work and for this great presentation. You know, we were all adaptable and technology gives up on us when we need it the most. So congratulations on pivoting and giving such a good presentation without the support of Canva. My question would be, so usually when we're in a position of power and we have to decide what we're going to do next when confronted with, you know, a spectrum of options in terms of implementing supportive actions for working parents, we need to prioritize. And my question to you is, if I were, you know, a leader of a small organization and I had employees who are, you know, new parents, what would you recommend that, you know, the first action that I take in order to support them be? My recommendation would be to
take the survey questions with the family-friendly policies that are considered best practice right now, and ask the employees what they would want first. Have them bring their voices to the table, and ask them what they want, and start there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions for Nicole? Okay. Well, oh, wait, I see one. Maria Santos. You'll have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Hi, Nicole.
Hi.
My question has to do, it's around intersectionality. It's still a very new term for me. I've been researching it legally because there's some collaborative law that talks about the intersectionality of discrimination. Can you speak to how you use it and what you mean by it in your work?
To me, it's having an awareness around which each identity that we all hold, it falls into either usually a bucket of you're in a place of power and privilege, or you're in a marginalized population. For example, someone white is in a place of power and privilege versus a person of color. Yet as a woman, I hold a marginalization because men in general in history hold more power and privilege. So it's having an awareness of all of those layers: religion, gender, sexuality, language, education, citizenship, all of those places, and just being able to look at that as a whole person, knowing that it's important to keep all of that in the forefront of your mind when working with people. I think I answered your question. Let me know if I didn't.